Let's talk about the other side of the market, the supply. The quantity supplied of any good is the amount that sellers are willing and able to sell. And the law of supply says that the quantity supplied of a good rises when the price of the good rises, other things equal. What that means is that quantity supplied and price have a positive relationship and will have a positive sloped graph, as we will see next. Let's start with the supply schedule, which is the table that shows the relationship between the price of a good and the quantity supplied. And our example is Starbucks. That's the firm we're talking about, which is going to supply lattes. If, hypothetically, the price were 0, the quantity Starbucks would be willing to supply would be 0. Note that, again, we're talking about hypothetical prices. Here, there are 7 hypothetical prices from 0 to 6. We only see one price in the market, but anyway, the supply curve is defined for each hypothetical price. If hypothetically the price were 1, the quantity Starbucks will be willing to supply is 3. Notice that the Starbucks supply schedule obeys the law of demand. Why? The larger the price, the larger the quantity supplied. If you compare the rows, larger prices, larger quantities. When we graph this 0, 0, 1, 3, 2, 6, 3, 9, and so on, the result is a positive sloped graph because both variables are moving in the same direction. Now, as in the case with the demand, we are interested in going from the individual supply to the market supply. The market supply is the quantity supplied in the market, which is basically every seller of lattes in that economy. For simplicity, we again are going to assume there are only 2. In reality, there are many more, especially because you're talking about perfect competition, but it will be very hard to make a table with so many sellers, so assume there are only 2. How do we derive the market supply from the individual suppliers? Well, it's intuitive. If price were 0, none of the suppliers would be willing to sell anything. 0 and 0. Therefore, the market supply would be 0. Now, if hypothetically the price were 1, Starbucks would be willing to supply 3, and we are assuming that Jitters would be willing to supply 2. So what's the market supply? Because there are only these 2 sellers, the market supply would be 5. And so on. So how do we go from the individual supply to the market supply? We add them up for each hypothetical price. Now we are interested only on this column, price, and the last column, quantity supplied. Putting these 2 columns together, we can graph them. Price in this axis, quantity supplying in this axis. Here we have the market supply curve. Now let's talk about the equilibrium price. After all, we don't see a range of prices in the market. We see one price in the market. How does this price come about? Well, the price that we actually see in the market is the called equilibrium price. A price that has reached the level where quantity supplied equal quantity demanded. So this is the equilibrium in the market. The market equilibrium is price equals 3, quantity equals 15. Basically, you look for the price when the curves intercept. That's the equilibrium price, and that will be the corresponding equilibrium quantity. Here we have price, the demand schedule, and the supply schedule. And you can see that when price equals 3, the quantity that consumers are willing to consume equals the quantity that suppliers are willing to supply. That's why the market is in equilibrium. So the price that equates quantity supplied with quantity demanded, 3, that's the equilibrium price. And the equilibrium quantity is the quantity supplied and quantity demanded at the same equilibrium price. Here, 15 and 15. But what if the market is not in equilibrium? What if there is a surplus or, as we will see next, a shortage? The point to note is the following. The market by itself will move towards the equilibrium. It doesn't need any government intervention and it doesn't need any private agent intervention. For instance, let's start with a surplus. In this case, assume that temporarily the price is above the equilibrium price. So instead of 3, let's say the price equals 5. We can see that the quantity demanded, which is 9, is smaller than the quantity supplied, that is 25. There is therefore a surplus of 16 units. That's the case when the firm is producing too much and not selling. They produced 25 lattes, but only 9 people bought them. Now, if you were the manager of that firm, what would you do? You certainly change your behavior. You do 2 things. First of all, you reduce the price, trying to get rid of the sales. And since you are producing so much more than you're selling, you also reduce the quantity. So instead of 25, you produce 20. And because you reduce the price, instead of selling only 10, you are selling here 12, for instance. As firms adjust and reduce the price, you can see that the size of the surplus is already reduced, but it's still not in equilibrium. But the process will continue until the market by itself reaches the equilibrium again. Firms will have incentive to reduce price because whenever the price is above the equilibrium one, supply will be always larger than demand. So this process will continue until we have the equilibrium. Now, temporarily, the price could also be below the equilibrium. That's when you have a shortage. The example here is price equals 1. You can see that the quantity demanded, 21 for this price, is larger than the quantity supplied, 5. So that's the case when you produce only 5 lattes and there's a line of 21 people knocking your door. 16 people will not be able to buy lattes from this store. Okay? There's a line of customers, of unsatisfied customers. If you were the manager of that firm, you would have incentive to change. What do you do? Well, first of all, you would increase prices, because if your product is so popular, there's so many people that want to buy it, you want to take advantage of that and increase prices. That will already reduce the demand. And also, since you're not producing enough, another reaction the firm would do, if you were the manager of the firm, is you would increase the quantity supplied. That by itself reduces the shortage, but still not enough. As long as price is below 3, it will continue to rise towards 3, because whenever the price is below 3, demand is larger than supply. So the process continues until the market reaches the equilibrium again. So, without any intervention, any government intervention, suppliers and demanders interact and the market by itself reaches an equilibrium.